World's tallest roller coaster. It's a phrase that will instantly put any roller coaster on the map. For over a century, the amusement industry has been challenging itself to see how high they can reach for the sky. Throughout the years, various parks and manufacturers have aimed for this record by pushing the boundaries of engineering. Of the thousands of roller coasters ever built, only a few have achieved the milestone of being the tallest in the world. The journey from point A to point B well represents the evolution of the industry as a whole. So today, we're going to look at the evolution of the coveted record of the tallest roller coaster on Earth. Before we get started though, let me preface by saying that the further back we go, the more fuzzy the details may get. The information in this video will be based on what I could find in newspapers and through the roller coaster database's search engine, and this video will be done to the best of my knowledge. While the history of the roller coaster is vast and expansive, there isn't a lot of information on the exact height of some of the earliest coasters. Rides like the 17th century Russian mountains and the Pont d'Arène in Paris are vital to the roller coaster's history, but the exact details of these rides are mostly lost to time. So let's fast forward to the late 1800s. Soon after Pennsylvania's Mauch-Chunk Railway was transformed from a coal transportation system to a thrill ride, a roller coaster was specifically built for American amusement parks for the first time. Ohio-born inventor LaMarcus Adna Thompson would soon patent a new thrill ride, supposedly based on the Mauch-Chunk. This new attraction was the Switchback Railway. This ride has simple design. Passengers would board the vehicles at the top before making their way downwards, traversing hills and dips along the way. The trains had no seatbelts, and there were no brakes to be found. The ride was an instant hit with the public, and several of them would pop up around the world over the next few years. The most famous of these rides, known as the Gravity Pleasure Switchback Railway, would open at Brooklyn's Coney Island on June 13, 1884. Sources at the time listed its height as being 50 feet tall, which was actually quite impressive for the time. It would technically be the first roller coaster in recorded history to hold the record as the world's tallest. However, 10 years later, the record would be broken by an incredibly ambitious attraction back in Pennsylvania. Long ago in the town of Percy, Menlo Park once operated as an amusement park with several attractions to enjoy, including a carousel that still stands today and a roller coaster that was way ahead of its time. Simply known as the Toboggan, this coaster provided a layout that was lengthier and more complex than Thompson's Switchback Railway. Instead of having to build tall supports, the coaster was built on a hill and fully used the natural terrain to its advantage. Long before rides like the Beast and the Ultimate, this made it among the first ever terrain coasters. The starting point of this coaster was 80 feet high, as guests would board the top of the hill before being sent down the natural slope. The whole ride was said to be over a half a mile in length, and its construction reportedly required 20,000 bolts and 50,000 feet of lumber. It was an instant success, carrying as many as 10,000 passengers in a single day. Unfortunately, the ride would eventually shut down in the 1920s after pranksters put rocks on the track, causing the vehicles to jump off of it. This led to the ride losing popularity with the general public, as many did not want to risk another incident like the one that happened. Even before its removal though, the ride's height record would be swiped by another roller coaster. This ride was the Giant Coaster. In 1917, a small park in Massachusetts underwent a major makeover. Known as Paragon Park, this was a small beachside amusement park in Hull, Massachusetts. After being severely damaged by a fire in 1916, park officials wanted to build bigger and better. The fire had burned down the Green Streak roller coaster, which was the park's main attraction. So after its demise, officials aimed on replacing it with something far superior. Coaster legend John A. Miller would design it, with American company Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters manufacturing it. The result would be the first new ride of the century to claim the record for the tallest roller coaster in the world, with a max height of 98 feet. This was especially impressive since it didn't use the terrain to its advantage. For the time, it was an amazing sight, and passengers would instantly flock to it. Even after it was damaged by another fire in 1932, it would be swiftly repaired. It would operate all the way until the park's closing in 1985, but that wasn't the end of this coaster. The year after it closed, it would be shipped to a park in Maryland named Wild World, now known as Six Flags America. It would be renamed Wild One, and this historically significant coaster still stands today. It recently celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2017, and having ridden it that year myself, I can safely say it runs amazing for its age. Truly a remarkable coaster. As for the record, the Giant Coaster would reign supreme, but there was one height-based milestone that still eluded the industry. the 100-foot mark. The giant coaster came close, but it came up short by just 2 feet. You'd think another park would try to outdo it as soon as possible, and that's exactly what happened. In 1919, the record moved westward, with the state of Utah debuting a new record-breaking attraction. This coaster ran at the famous Saltaire, a dreamlike leisure resort on the Great Salt Lake. It was originally advertised as Race Through the Clouds, but was later renamed to Giant Racer. As its name implied, it was a racing coaster that had 2 tracks running side by side, both of which stood at a top height of 110 feet. This made it the first coaster in recorded history to hit the 100-foot mark. For many West Coast enthusiasts, it seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime attraction, but in 1924, it wouldn't hold the record alone. Joining Giant Racer was Giant Skyrocket in Texas. This coaster was originally built at Luna Park in Houston, Texas, and as its name implied, it was indeed giant, standing at a max height of 110 feet. It was also said by the park to be around 1.25 miles long, which, if true, would make it one of the top 10 longest roller coasters ever built. However, its true length has often been debated, with some suggesting it was exaggerated by park officials. When Giant Skyrocket was relocated to Houston's Playland Park in 1941, it was simply renamed the roller coaster. After its aforementioned relocation, the layout would be significantly shortened. For a while, Giant Racer and Giant Skyrocket would hold the record for the world's tallest coaster together. Unfortunately, Giant Racer would soon be heavily damaged by a fire in July of 1931. The damage in this case was more severe, and it would pretty much require an entire rebuilding of the coaster. During said reconstruction, a tragic accident saw the structure being partially blown over in a windstorm. This resulted in the death of 2 workmen. Nevertheless, park officials carried on, working tooth and nail to get this ride open. And get it open they did. While the ride did reclaim the tied height record, it would be just 5 years before it was broken yet again. On the other hand, this attraction would be a lot different from past record holders. In 1937, New Jersey's historic Palisades Amusement Park opened a roller coaster unlike any other we've discussed so far. This coaster, named Lake Placid Bobsled, would be a wooden bobsled coaster, also known as a Flying Turns ride. This relatively new coaster variety was vastly different from other rides of its kind. Instead of a fixed standard track with rails, the trains would navigate a half-pipe style track similar to the one used in bobsled racing. The vehicles would freely navigate the track, swaying left and right with the lateral force of each turn. It was incredibly impressive for its time, and its stats were especially eye-popping. The ride was said to have a top speed of 70 miles per hour and a top height of 125 feet. This not only made it the tallest and fastest roller coaster at the time, but it still holds the milestone of being the tallest and fastest bobsled coaster ever built. Sadly though, due to its high intensity, the ride allegedly faced many issues during its run, and in 1946, the coaster would cease operation. After the bobsled's closure, the Racer and the Skyrocket would reclaim the height record. But in a cruel twist of fate, Giant Racer would face a bitter end. In 1957, an estimated 75-mile-per-hour wind gust would topple the coaster's framework. Between this, the fire that destroyed the original Giant Racer, the previous windstorm, and another fire in 1949, Saltaire just couldn't catch a break. There were reportedly discussions to rebuild it again, but those plans never came into fruition. After Giant Racer's closure, the coaster formerly known as Giant Skyrocket would hold the record on its own until around 1964. The exact date of its closure is unknown, but 1964 would see yet another record breaker open to the public, this time at Mexico City's La Feria Chapultepec Mágico. The ride's name was Montaña Rusa, which is the Spanish term for roller coaster. Interestingly enough, this phrase directly translates to Russian mountain, which is a tribute to the very origin of the roller coaster. Built by International Amusement Devices Incorporated, this would be the last wooden roller coaster to hold the height record at 110 feet. With both Giant Racer and Giant Skyrocket gone, Montaña Rusa was free to hold the record solo. Just like with Giant Racer, this ride features 2 separate tracks that passengers could race each other on. But unlike Giant Racer, it featured a Mobius loop layout, which connects both sides of the track into one single layout. This allows riders to board on one side while getting off on the other. Some say Mobius loops count as 2 credits since you can ride it twice, while others say it counts as 1 credit because you have to ride it twice to experience the whole track length. Either way, for the first time ever, an amusement park outside of the United States held the record. But it would be a mere 2 years later that the record was broken yet again, this time across the Pacific in the land of the rising sun. Long before Dodonpa and Takabisha, Japan's Fuji-Q Highland introduced their first roller coaster. Interestingly enough, it would be yet another ride simply named Giant Coaster, making it the second record holder to have that name. Built by Japanese manufacturer Sansei Yosoki, this would be the first ever steel roller coaster to hold the height record. At 131.2 feet tall, this coaster was both long and packed with airtime. The coaster is especially well known in Japan as the subject of late magician Hikida Tenko's escape act. This act saw Tenko being placed in a coffin and laid on the roller coaster train, which was then set on fire. The daring trick ended with the train bursting into flames, and Tenko escaping unscathed. What a badass. For quite a while, it seemed like no roller coaster would be able to top the height of this one. But in 1977, German manufacturer Schwarzkopf managed to do just that. That was the year he debuted his first shuttle loop model to the market. Unlike the previous record holders, this one would be a shuttle coaster. Shuttle coasters are a type of roller coaster where the track isn't a complete circuit. Instead, riders traverse the course both forwards and backwards. In the shuttle loop's case, riders would be launched through a vertical loop and up a slope before gravity sends them backwards. This was one of the earliest examples of a launched roller coaster, and it would use an advanced weight drop system to catapult passengers through the course. In 1977 alone, 3 of these rides would open to the public: White Lightning at North Carolina's Carowinds, King Cobra at Virginia's King's Dominion, and Tidal Wave at California's Marriott's Great America. Each new prototype stood at 137.8 feet tall, beating the Giant Coaster by around 8 feet. But here's where the record gets a bit complicated. It's often debated whether or not the record should apply to full circuit coasters only, or if it should allow room for shuttle coasters. With shuttle coasters, the train isn't meant to reach the very top of the structure. The extra height is only there to let the train burn off its speed. Meanwhile in California, Schwarzkopf struck yet again with Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm. Unlike the previous shuttle loops, this one utilized a flywheel launch system instead of a weight drop system. While the weight drop system used a giant weight attached to a cable, the flywheel system used a series of large spinning wheels to build up momentum for the launch. This more advanced system was actually slightly slower than its predecessor. Nevertheless, Montezuma's Revenge was even taller at 148 feet. Even today, it remains one of the only flywheel shuttle loops still standing. The concept of a shuttle coaster quickly caught on. The idea of being able to build a high-level thrill ride in a more compact space was especially appealing to the amusement industry. In fact, 2 years after Montezuma's Revenge, Japanese manufacturer Senyo Kogyo premiered a shuttle loop design of their own at their home country's Mitsui Greenland. This now-defunct coaster named Atomic Coaster was similar to Schwarzkopf's shuttle loop, except it used a chain lift to build momentum instead of a launch. At 164.1 feet tall, it once again gave Japan the overall height record, but shortly thereafter, the country outdid itself with perhaps the most epic shuttle coaster of all time. In 1983, Fuji-Q Highland opened a roller coaster like no other, whose intensity and sheer scale had never been seen before. Introducing Moonsault Scramble. To say this coaster was game-changing was a complete understatement. Built by Japanese manufacturer Meisho, this coaster stood at an enormous 229.7 feet tall. This made it the first roller coaster ever to structurally surpass the 200-foot mark, and its opening gave Fuji-Q Highland both the full circuit and the structural height record. And that wasn't the only impressive thing about it. Featuring a surreal pretzel knot inversion, this coaster managed to use it to pull an estimated 6.5 Gs. Of course, this likely proved to be far too intense for many, but the sight of it alone was worth visiting the park. It would operate all the way until the year 2000. As for the full circuit record, Giant Coaster would continue to hold on to it through the 70s and early 80s. In 1985 though, an indoor Canadian park would get its own shot at the full circuit record. That year, Edmonton's Galaxyland amusement park opened yet another Schwarzkopf coaster named Mindbender. This enormous 3-looped coaster would stand at 145 feet tall, and even today, it remains the tallest indoor roller coaster of all time. So even on a rainy day, you can still check out this A-list thrill ride. It would be the tallest full-circuit Schwarzkopf coaster ever built. And sadly, it would be the last time they held the record, because in 1987, Kings Island in Mason, Ohio would get their own opportunity to shine. This new coaster named Vortex was made by American manufacturer Aerodynamics. It would take not just one, but 2 world records. First, it took the inversion record, with 6 total upside-down moments. Moreover, it captured the full circuit height record at 148 feet tall. Until its closure in 2019, Vortex would stand as one of the most visually stunning attractions in the park, eliciting a chorus of oohs and ahs from parkgoers. It was a true gem in Kings Island's lineup, and for 1987, it was a one-of-a-kind creation. Less than a year after Vortex opened, the full circuit height record would be taken yet again by a Japanese park. Built by Japanese manufacturer Togo, this coaster known as Bandit was constructed at Tokyo's Yomiuri Land. This lengthy sit-down coaster stands at 167.3 feet tall, featuring an almost mile-long course of airtime hills and an impressive double helix. At this point, the amusement industry was going all in on bigger and more exciting thrill rides. So this is where the records really started piling up. Just 3 months after Bandit opened, Aerodynamics struck back with the opening of Shockwave at Illinois Six Flags Great America. This coaster model was known as a Mega Looper, and at 170 feet tall, it really made an impact on the industry. While Vortex was the first coaster to have 6 inversions, this would be the first one to have 7. 3 loops, a batwing, and a double corkscrew made up its layout, and the coaster received a great deal of media attention at the time. Indeed, the Mega Coaster seemed like the model the Coasterverse needed to kick off a new era of thrills, and the next year, another one would open at New Jersey Six Flags Great Adventure. Known as the Great American Scream Machine, this coaster was slightly taller at 173 feet, though it featured the same general layout as Shockwave. By the height of a 3/4 guitar, the Scream Machine took the full circuit height record, but not so fast, because less than a month later, Aerodynamics yet again outdid themselves with a much taller coaster at Ohio's Cedar Point. A coaster that would blow everyone away and shake the industry to its core. Epically called Magnum XL 200, this coaster set a new record at 205 feet tall. It was the first full circuit coaster to hit the 200-foot mark, which made it the first ever hypercoaster by definition. And unlike Moonsault Scramble, every passenger was able to reach that 200-foot mark. Though its airtime-focused layout had no inversions, a height like this had never been seen before in the United States. It had the public in disbelief and left coaster enthusiasts begging to marathon it. And with such crazy ejector airtime, it's no wonder why. Aerodynamics was on an absolute roll, so the question was, how long would it be before Aero outdid themselves again? Well, just 5 years after Magnum opened, Aero would bring the height record to Europe at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach. In 1994, the Coaster Wars met the Cola Wars with the Pepsi Max Big One. This was yet another Aero Hyper, but this one would be slightly taller at 213 feet. Overlooking the shore of the Irish Sea, this coaster takes guests on an out-and-back journey at 74 miles per hour. Though not as acclaimed as Magnum, it holds its own as one of the most iconic British coasters out there, and is still the tallest in the country. Although the full circuit record continued to be shattered throughout the late 80s and early 90s, Moonsault Scramble was just chilling in the background as the tallest coaster overall. Its enormous structure would end up holding the structural height record for over a decade. Its reign would last all the way until 1996. Fortunately for Fuji-Q Highland, it wouldn't lose the height record. In fact, the park's newest coaster would not only be taller than Moonsault Scramble, but it would take the full circuit record as well. This coaster would be Fujiyama, a 259-foot tall sit-down coaster by Japanese manufacturer Togo. It would be the largest and most impressive coaster ever designed by the company. Even better, Fuji-Q Highland was once again home to both the tallest full-circuit coaster and the tallest shuttle coaster. Now that's what I call some serious bragging rights. Starting off with an enormous 230-foot drop, this coaster takes guests on an airtime-packed adventure, complete with near-miss moments with the supports and surreal slaloming turns. It is often considered by well-traveled enthusiasts to be the greatest roller coaster ever built by Togo. Unfortunately, Fuji-Q Highland was celebrating the record on borrowed time, because back across the Pacific, a new roller coaster was about to stun the amusement industry. A coaster so tall and so fast, it was hard for many to believe. In January 1996, California's Six Flags Magic Mountain announced their newest thrill ride, Superman the Escape. Not only would it be the first coaster to hit 100 miles per hour, not only would it be the first coaster to hit the 300-foot mark, but it would be the first roller coaster on Earth to hit the 400-foot mark. Built by Swiss manufacturer Intamin, this prototype model will be known as a reverse freefall coaster. The design was set to use a state-of-the-art magnetic launch system to shoot riders up an enormous vertical track ramp before gravity took them back down. The layout seemed incredibly basic, but its stats alone were enough to immediately draw the attention of the amusement industry. The coaster was set to open in May of 1996, but unfortunately for Magic Mountain, it would have to wait a while to capture the record. Due to technical issues with the launch system, the coaster wouldn't open in 1996, which allowed Fujiyama to keep a hold on the overall height record for a little bit longer. It would take until 1997 for Superman to open, but not before the height record was broken yet again by the Land Down Under. In January 1997, another reverse freefall model would open at Queensland, Australia's Dreamworld. This one, named Tower of Terror, had no relation to the Disney ride of the same name. In fact, it was much taller at 377 feet. The ride experience would be the exact same as Superman the Escape, but because of its delays, Tower of Terror would hold the record for a few months. Of course, it wouldn't be long before Superman would open 2 months later. This new coaster experience would stand at 415 feet tall. With the 400-foot mark out of the way, speculation began as to what would be the next park to break the record. What kind of model would it be? Would it be another reverse freefall or something else entirely? And what about the full circuit record? Superman was the tallest coaster structurally, but Fujiyama remained the tallest complete circuit coaster. For the rest of the 1990s, Fujiyama would reign supreme in the full circuit category, but the new millennium was coming. Was there something out there? Well, yes there was, and that something was Millennium Force at Cedar Point. In May of 2000, Intamin swooped into the full circuit category with the world's first giga coaster. While a hypercoaster is 200 feet or more in less than 300 feet, a giga coaster is 300 feet or more in less than 400 feet. At 310 feet tall, this coaster stands on the shore of Lake Erie, giving its riders one of the greatest views in amusement park history. From the moment it opened, its 300-foot drop would plummet guests downward, and at 93 miles per hour, the trains would thrillingly navigate a lengthy course of hills, dips, and bank turns. Many enthusiasts rank this coaster as one of the greatest of all time, and it's destined to go down in history as one of the most influential roller coasters of the millennium, though its height record would be broken less than 3 months later. Once again, Japan would reclaim the record, but it wasn't at Fuji-Q Highland. Instead, a southern Japanese park named Nagashima Spa Land would introduce its own giga coaster named Steel Dragon 2000. Opening on August 1st, this coaster greeted guests with a top height of 318 feet tall, beating Millennium Force by a mere 8 feet. Instead of Intamin, this coaster would be built by American manufacturer Morgan, and its construction would be both unique and complex. Due to its location in an earthquake-sensitive area of Japan, an extra amount of steel was needed to protect the structure. The result is a dense support structure that sufficiently prevents earthquake damage. The ride itself contains much larger airtime hills than Millennium Force, as well as an enormous banked helix. With Steel Dragon 2000 holding the full circuit height record, and Superman holding the structural one, it seemed like the records would never overlap again. After all, who would be crazy enough to build a full circuit coaster taller than Superman? Who would be able to handle the logistical challenges such a coaster would face, the construction, the engineering, and more? I have a phrase I often use: never underestimate Intamin. 6 years after Superman opened, Intamin would not only top its height, but it would do so in a complete circuit, and once again, Cedar Point would be a magnet for bragging rights. After the resounding success of both Millennium Force and Wicked Twister, Intamin was brought back to Ohio to build something that would shock the socks off of thrill seekers. In 2002, a mystery attraction began construction at Cedar Point. Online speculation ran rampant throughout the year, but the park kept quiet about it all the way until January. As it turned out, for the first time in history, a full-circuit roller coaster was about to break the 400-foot barrier, and that coaster was Top Thrill Dragster. This model, known as an accelerator, was relatively new to the industry, with only one having been built at Knott's Berry Farm. However, Cedar Point's version would be over twice as tall. Naturally themed to drag racing, this coaster launches guests on an amazing 120 miles per hour. Instead of the magnetic launch of Superman, Dragster would use a hydraulic cable launch, allowing for an even faster acceleration. After passing the launch track, the train ascends an enormous 420-foot tall top hat element. For a few seconds, passengers will get a jaw-dropping view of the park around them before spiraling back to Earth. The duration is short, but the ride experience is still widely acclaimed by park fans. The intensity of its launch, the openness of the lap bars, and the view from the top all make this one of the park's best attractions. With a roller coaster so fast, so massive, and so popular, it seemed unlikely to be outdone anytime soon. But just over a year later, the tiger known as Six Flags would pounce on its prey. In September 2004, Six Flags Great Adventure made an earth-shattering announcement that no doubt disappointed Cedar Point officials. Say hello to Kingda Ka, the new, tallest and fastest roller coaster on Earth. This brand new intimate accelerator would make its debut on May 21st, 2005. Though the ride experience was extremely similar to Top Thrill Dragster, it did have a few small differences. First of all, the ride would replace the straight track after the top hat with a high-speed airtime hill. Second, it would have over-the-shoulder restraints instead of lap bars, allegedly due to New Jersey state laws. Finally, it would be slightly faster and taller with a record-breaking speed of 128 miles per hour and an astonishing all-time height record of 456 feet. So there it was. Six Flags had taken the height record in stunning fashion, and to this day, New Jersey still remains home to the tallest roller coaster in the world. Although its speed record would be broken by Formula Rossa at the UAE's Ferrari World Abu Dhabi, no manufacturer has managed to build taller than Kingda Ka as of yet. Now that brings us to another question. After over a century of constantly breaking records, why hasn't the industry built taller? Many have speculated that the technical issues of both Kingda Ka and Top Thrill Dragster made the accelerator model less appealing to potential buyers, while others blame the 2008 financial crisis. But it's a lot more complicated than that. There are many reasons why parks aren't racing to build a coaster taller than Kingda Ka. First off, many parks are restricted by height limits on what they can build, due to planning agreements and local ordinances. In many instances, local residents wish to avoid the high noise levels and obstructed skylines such attractions would bring. And even if a park could theoretically build a new world's tallest coaster, the cost of doing so would prove too much on a budget level. Even companies with higher budgets like Disney and Universal would rather put that kind of money into the theming and overall ride experience of their roller coasters instead of just the stats. Over the years, various attractions have been planned that could have been taller than Kingda Ka, the most recent of which being the Polar Coaster project, but for one reason or another, those projects just haven't been built. Will we see the height record be broken again? It's certainly not impossible, but for now, the state of New Jersey can take pride in their world-class record breaker. Before we wrap things up, I just want to give a special shout out to my new Patreon supporter. Verbal shoutouts start at the gold tier, so if you don't hear your name, it will be listed at the end of the video. Here is a special shout out to Julie Beauregard. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, I've put a link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.